one of the cool features in QGIS is the ability to create models. Now, this is very similar to something you may have seen in, say, ESRI's Model Builder. Now, it's still a work in development, so it's not quite at the level that Model Builder is at, but it is a start, and I want to begin to show you how we can create these models in QGIS because it's a really powerful type of a capability. Because once you build a model, you can then give that model to other friends and let them run more sophisticated processes without having to know the ins and outs of the GIS. So I have here the result of our model, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a model that clips the parcels in the Cascadilla Creek watershed that are at risk for flooding, and then we're going to sum up those land values. So basically, here I have the parcels that are clipped to the Cascadilla Creek watershed, and then what I also have here in yellow are those parcels that are now clipped that are inside the flood zone. Now, obviously, there are a lot of different ways to do this, but the point of this exercise is to show you the capabilities with the model building in QGIS so that you can start to build your own. So let's sort of define what we're going to try and do. This is a bit of a cartoonish model in what we plan on doing. Basically, I have some inputs, parcels and watersheds and the flood zones. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select by attribute in the watersheds, or I'm going to extract by the attributes in order to grab just the Cascadilla Creek watershed. Then I'm going to clip the parcels in the watershed, which will give me a clipped version, sort of like what you saw in brown earlier, which when you come back here, that gives us this brown area. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to clip that result with the flood zones. And once that's done, I'm going to have really what we have in yellow here. And then finally, we're going to run a statistical summary on that data so that we get the final layer as well as a final table that gives us statistical summaries of the parcels that meet the criteria that we were talking about. Well, right now I've got a blank QGIS project, and I'm in our Tompkins and shapefile directory. So let's grab our watersheds. We'll just throw it in there. And let's also grab our flood zones. We'll throw those in there. So those are two of the layers that we needed. And then let's just go up a bit, and we'll go into our geodatabases, and let's grab the parcels. So now we have all of our data ready to go. Now in our processing toolbox, we can have a little icon that says models. We can pull that down and create a new model, or we can come up here and say graphical modeler. So let's open that up. So now I have a model screen or canvas that I can begin to work in. Now going back to our cartoon diagram, let's sort of create that. We need the parcels, the watersheds, and the flood zones. So those are the layers that we're going to be working with. So in the modeling canvas, you can see we have algorithms. So these are all the kinds of things that we can do, like all of our vector analysis, and we also have inputs. So for the inputs, what I want are vector layers. Let's put our first one in here, and we'll call that our parcels. There it is. And let's bring in another one, and we'll call that our watersheds. So these are parameter names, and they're going to be used momentarily. And then let's add another one. We'll put it over here, sort of where we had it before, and we'll call this flood zones. There we go. So we now have 3 layers inside of our canvas. Let's tidy this up just a little bit. So what I want to do is just go through this slowly. So for our first algorithm, let's extract just the Cascadilla Creek watershed. So I'm going to type extract, and we can see here extract by attribute. You can see all the other kinds of vector selections, right? Extract by expression or location. Let's do extract by attribute. And what input layer do we want? Well, we're going to want the watersheds. Click on that. And what's the selection attribute? It's watershed. Now let's leave that just working like this for now. And then I'm going to type Cascadilla Creek. And what I want to do now is for those that are extracted, let's call this extract WS for extracted watershed. Now now I have an input going to a function, and then I've got an output. So let's run this. So the parcels are the parcels, the watersheds, here are the watersheds, and the flood zones. And we can just leave this. It'll be called extract WS. Let's run that. That's done. Let's close it. Come back into QGIS. And you see I have this layer here. Let's turn the parcels off. And notice we now have a layer that is just the extracted watershed for Cascadilla Creek. So if we click on watersheds here, there's Cascadilla Creek. Now that's pretty close to what I want to do, but let's get a little bit fancier. Here I've got the input layer. It asks me what the attribute is, so it's the watershed field. And there's really nothing else to add here. It asks me what the operator is. It's equal to Cascadilla Creek. Let's make a couple of changes. So first thing I want to do is go back into my inputs, and I want to create a vector field. And let's add the vector field here. And we'll call this watershed field. Its parent layer is the watershed. So we're going to grab the watershed. Now, the allowable data type, I only want it to be a string. And we'll hit OK. So that's a field that's part of this. Also, I want to get a string. And we'll call this the watershed name. Hit OK. So now I have a field and a name as a string. Let's double click our extract by attribute. So the input layer is watershed. Now we want to get the watershed field, and the operator is equal to, and the value now is going to come from the model input. And it's going to be the watershed name. So let's try this again. Now I've got let's make our parcels parcels and our flood zones the flood zones. And now I have my watershed. Now notice there's only one field because that's the only string field inside of watershed. So it found that. And then what's the watershed name? Cascadilla Creek. So notice the data is no longer hard-coded in. Now notice we have another new extracted Cascadilla Creek watershed. So let's remove that. And let's remove the next one. Okay, so that's now removed. We have a cleaner map that we can look at. So we're starting to get there. We've done our select by attribute, or at least our extract. So the next thing we want to do is clip the parcels in that watershed. So let's go back into our model builder. And we can come into our algorithms, and I'm going to type clip. There we go. There's vector overlay. We'll put clip. We'll put that, how about right over here? And what's my input layer? My input layer are going to be my parcels. My overlay layer is going to be my watersheds. And actually, they're not going to be my watersheds. They are going to be the extracted attributes. Right? Because what I want, and we'll call this PW clip, right? Parcel watershed clip. We could call that anything. It's important though to get our overlay layer, because I don't want to overlay it with the watersheds. I want to overlay it with the extracted watersheds. Now I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves before we add more fancy things. So let's just run this. So now I have my parcels. We'll change this to my watersheds. We'll change this to my flood zones. And the watershed name, or the field, is just watershed, because that's the only one that's available to us. The name is Cascadilla Creek. And PW clip, that's fine. We can call them. We'll just leave them with these names. And we'll run this. And close it. And let's go back into our map. Now notice here's my PW clip and my extraction. So this is the extraction that we created of Cascadilla Creek, and then this is the result of the clip. These are the parcels that are clipped inside of it. The next step right now is to take our flood zones and clip it with the results of our clip. So back in here again, we're going to do another clip. And in this case, the input layer is going to be the results of the clipped. Right, we could change these into other names as well if we wanted to. And let's do that. Let's do clip with flood zones. And I can come back in here in this clip with watershed and parcels. That's good. And now we can run this clip. So clip with watersheds and parcels. The overlay layer is going to be the flood zones. And we'll call this par flood clip. Okay, so let's run this just to see how it turns out. So my parcels are now my parcels, my watersheds, flood zones, and watershed name is Cascadilla Creek. And we'll just leave it at that. Let's run this. Taking a little longer now because we're doing a little bit more activity. We'll close and let's go back into QGIS. And here's our result. Here's our clip of the parcels. Let's turn all of these off. In fact, we'll even turn off the watersheds. And now we can zoom in. And you can see we have the parcels that are clipped by the flood zones that are inside the watershed for Cascadilla Creek. Let's go in here now and just remove a bunch of these layers because they're not really all that important to us. And remove all of them, and then we can turn these back on. Now the last step, of course, is to create a statistical summary of those results. And in particular, I'm interested in what are the summaries of the property assessment values. So we come back in here and I'm going to just type statistics. And which one? Well, this is the one. There's basic statistics for fields, but I'm going to create statistics by categories. How do I know that? Well, part of creating this was just hunting around, searching for things. So we'll put that in here. And now what I want to do, that's called statistics by categories. What's our input vector? Well, in our case, it's going to be the clipped from the parcels and the flood zones. And for the field, we'll type ASMT. I want to do it with the assessment value. And then what's the field that has the categories? The field with the categories, in this case, is, I believe is LU. We're going to just double check that. So let's go back into our map real quick. And if I open up the attribute table, wait for that to pop open, and scroll across, there's prop class, so that's what we want. So coming back in here, now the field is prop class. I knew the assessment value was all the values for the assessment, and we'll call this out stats. Hit OK. So now we can run this. And our parcels, we can grab our watersheds, our flood zones, and then Cascadilla Creek. And we'll call this, keep that PW clip. Yeah, we can do all this. We'll call this, yeah, we'll leave it at extract WS. So it'll take on these base names if we want. And we'll run this. Okay, that's done. We'll close it. Let's go back into our map. And here are our out stats. So first off, you can see our clipped parcels and our clipped flood zones with the parcels. And now if I right click, you can see these are the property class values based upon the assessment. So for residential properties, there are 573 that fall into that area. This is the sum of their assessment values. This is the average assessment value. So all these statistics are now available inside a report. What's nice is about a model like this is I can do the same thing, parcels, watersheds, flood zones, and I can type Cascadilla Creek, and we'll hit run. That's over. Remember, we just did that. And we could also run it again. And in this case, I can get my parcels. I can get my watersheds. I can get my flood zones. And I can type in Fall Creek. And let's call the out statistics Fall Stats. So this is a different watershed that we can run. Okay, so that's completed. Or actually, it's still running. We'll give that a second. I'll turn off the video. That Fall Creek is a much bigger one. We can come in here and I can again change Fall Creek to 6 Mile Creek and then rerun it. And in here now I've got a whole bunch of different ones that I've run, so I should have called them a different name, but we can zoom to the layer. So there's our first one. Here's our next one. So here's 6 Mile Creek that you can see here. And then we'll zoom to this layer. And this is Fall Creek. So this model gets run over and over again and can continue to spit out the results. The other thing we can do here is I can also save the model in the project. Oh, I got to give it a model name. So I'm going to call this Watershed Extract. Save the model in the project. And then we come into our project models. You can see I now have a model. Double click on that and we can begin running it, and that's a model I can give to my friends to use. The other thing we can also do is begin to edit the model help. So I can add something like here, say this will overlay watersheds and parcels. And now I've got a description of that for the input parameters, the parcels. These are the Tompkins County parcels. And you can see this whole thing gets filled out. So now you have an actual help file that's a part of the actual model that you've built. So that's just a brief look at how we create models in QGIS. You can see that there's a lot more that you can do. You can play around with a lot of different algorithms and then make a lot of different adjustments as well. But hopefully this got you started and you can start building your own models.